afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar with ASATA. With us today, we have CEO Otto de Vries and our legal eagle, Elizabeth de Stadler from Novation Consulting, talking a bit about what ASATA has been doing and also providing you with some advice we hope. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions throughout the session for our response at the end if we have time. If we do not have time, I'm going to paste a survey link in the chat, and you are absolutely welcome to post your question within that survey and we will deal with them as best we can. To ask a question, you go to the bottom Q&A folder, type those, and if we have time, as I said, we'll respond to them. So the SurveyMonkey link will be in the chat. If you have any questions, you're welcome to add those questions to the chat, at least to the survey. And our team is literally working around the clock to try and get you as many resources and guidance as we can as we go through this really unprecedented and unpredictable time. So with that, I'll hand over to Otto now, and he's going to take you through the rest of the webinar. Over to you, Otto.
Thanks, Nats, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your time. I know the time is incredibly precious, and hopefully we'll be able to show you today a little bit about the work that your association has currently been working on for the past couple of weeks, to give you a sense of how we are doing our level best to support you, the trade. As part of the questionnaire process, obviously, we'd be very, very appreciative of where you feel there are other areas where you need industry support from your association, and we will do our level best to try and deliver that on those questions and on that assistance. But I think today is really an opportunity for myself and Elizabeth to take you through some of the work that we've done, where you can access that information, and how hopefully that will support you in terms of some of the decision making and the business processes that you need to apply as we go through this unprecedented crisis of our industry at this stage. I just want to say to you all, we are thinking of you. You are in our thoughts. We are doing our level best to support you, and we want to just wish you all the very best at this very, very difficult time. So one of the things that we did is we launched a couple of weeks ago a microsite specifically focusing on coronavirus. We did this because we recognized that there was a huge amount of information out in the marketplace. A lot of it was unvetted, untested, a lot of it fake news. There's a particularly high risk of having access to fake news if you are spending a lot of time on social media. And we saw this as an opportunity to ensure that this was vetted, carefully considered, and useful information that we thought would add value to the travel industry and to our members. As this site grew and developed, we had to do a number of additional changes, and we will continue to modify it to make sure that it's not only easy to access, but also that it is easy to navigate. And you will, if you see on the screen, you will see that what we've done on the top is we've got a number of sections. We have the ASATA Coronavirus Resources. That is a section that specifically highlights the work that we've done, and we'll spend some time talking about that today, specifically on your behalf. We have then also made available all of the South African government updates as it relates to travel bans, health and safety, etc. The World Health Organization, as the preeminent source of information regarding the spread of the virus, provide daily updates. We've made that available through that link. We have also vetted and carefully positioned on our microsite here the news articles. And then finally, whilst a tough one, but one where we've been asked by several of you to please provide support, is supplier updates. And the idea there is really to ensure that our suppliers and partners will provide as much content and information that is relevant to you all. And also, I think in particular, when it relates to policy changes, or as we've seen with a lot of the airlines, they have been quite proactive, not all, but many have been very proactive in supporting and providing amendments to standard terms and conditions, and where those have been made available and what those processes look like, we've made that available under the supplier updates. So that just broadly gives you a sense of what we've done. Guys, that's a website. You can obviously find it if you go to www.asata.co.za, but you can also type in www.coronavirus www.asata.ca. So either through our main site or directly onto the microsite. That is being constantly updated all day, every day, and hopefully you will find this to be a very valuable resource. So if we just dip into the ASATA resources section, there are a few bits and pieces there that I just want to highlight. We're not going to go through them now because you'll obviously be able to access all of those documents, draw them down and look at them in your own time. But I did want to give you a sense a little bit about what it is that we've been doing and how we've gone about it. So under the resources page, you will find, amongst other things, a document called Coronavirus, How Do I Protect Myself? This is a small little infographic that the team have prepared and is a little bit of a guideline, a visual guideline to show you what small steps you can take around personal hygiene and protection, specifically at home, in the office, but also when you're traveling. So by all means, tap into that and use it as you see fit, share it with your staff and colleagues. Then we spent an inordinate amount of time before the crisis really struck our shores in developing a Q&A, which we called, Should I Take That Trip? Your Coronavirus Outbreak Travel Questions Answered. And what we attempted to do there was to try and screen and alleviate some of the bottlenecks that we'd noted was coming up, particularly amongst you, the members, around questions that was being asked by customers. So if you look at that, it relates to questions around insurance. It relates to questions around whether or not you should be canceling your trip. And as you know, we have taken a very clear stance, and this is a global stance, where we are encouraging customers to rather look at postponing or rescheduling their travel versus canceling outright. We've highlighted there that indeed there might actually be additional financial costs and risks associated to doing a full cancellation versus opportunities to rather reschedule. And we believe that that policy will broadly also support you as the members as you go into an unprecedented phase where your cash flows are going to be immensely tested as we find that the sales starts to diminish and continues to drop against a background of people expecting you to support them around cancellations and wanting refunds. So we focused a little bit on whether you should cancel the trip or not. We spoke a little bit about insurance and how do you pick insurance. Because I think, again, and I'm sure you are too, we're getting lots of questions from consumers around why are we not getting our money back? Why is it taking so long? I haven't travel insurance and surely this should cover things. Of course, it's never that simple. And it is our role and responsibility to ensure that we explain these to the customers and that they clearly understand what their obligations and responsibilities are, and so too what are ours, and that ultimately refunds and processing of refunds may take some time. In a radio interview that I did this morning, these questions were posed to me, and I said, look, I would really welcome that the consumers show a little bit of patience as our members are overwhelmed with queries from customers, not only on their rights and what they should or shouldn't expect with regards to changes in travel bans, but what happens if they're looking to postpone or cancel. And indeed, you know, we need to be able to have time to engage each of the suppliers as part of the packages that you've booked for them, and to ensure that we do our level best to try to get, if not all, most of their money back. So I have requested broadly that the public just try to show a little bit of patience and support us as we go through this. So we've spoken about booking flights and rescheduling. What happens if you want to end your trip early? You can well imagine, as you well know, that this is a moving target. And it's one of our biggest challenges is making sure that we're delivering up-to-date relevant information to you. We will, and it might actually be up already, but it will certainly be up by the end of this session. We have an updated FAQ specifically related to the President's announcement and the impact of travel bans. And we've hopefully summarized that in a succinct manner that will give you guys a lot more clarity, and hopefully we've answered all of the questions that we know we've been getting and possibly you've been getting too. So that was one of the first documents that we prepared. And then we also started to look at some of your other very specific challenges that we know you'll be facing. And those challenges include business continuity, and understanding how to manage your business in this very, very difficult time. And what we did is we got our legal and consulting advisors to jump in and start preparing a document which is available to you. And it's basically 5 things that you can do to help protect and safeguard your business. And this is genuinely about ensuring that there is some level of business continuity. Because of course, what we're not dealing with here is business as usual. This is a very unusual and a very extreme situation in a time that we find ourselves in. And it will require very careful and considered planning on your part to minimize the fallout and the risks that it places on your businesses. So at that point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to hand over to Elizabeth de Stadler. Elizabeth is the ASATA legal counsel and is from a business called Novation Consulting. And Elizabeth has been working with ASATA for a number of years now and is a valued and a very important part of our team. And Elizabeth will take you through this section. And there are some very particular areas that we know you have asked questions about, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of that during the course of this particular session. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Thanks, Otto. Right, so I'm gonna get straight to it. So we, as Otto mentioned, created a little document called 5 Ways to Safeguard Your Business. And these are focused really on a discipline called business continuity management or crisis management. So the first principle is really also what Otto has been talking about right now, is making sure that you are basing your decisions on the right information. There's a massive amount of misinformation doing the rounds out there. And so my advice to you would be to pick 2 or 3 sources that you go to for your news. Obviously, the ASATA Microsite, and I can say this from personal experience, has been an invaluable resource to us, and we've even been sending people who do not belong to your industry to that website. So that's obviously where we would start. You should also, though, choose sort of a business analyst that you trust. So sorry, just to go back for a moment, obviously also for your scientific information, you can go to the Johns Hopkins site. There's also a link to that from the ASATA Microsite. This is certainly the site that we use just to get on top of the figures. And then the third thing that you need to find is sort of incisive business analysis on what the implications of this virus is for businesses. This is the one that I have found the most helpful from McKinsey & Company, but there are several sources out there. And I will talk a little bit more about what is in this resource as we go through the presentation. Right, so then the second point that I want to make is a lot of times what is happening at the moment is it's a very fast evolving situation. And you are going to have to make decisions in what certainly for many companies would be a very, very short time frame. And the key to success here is to set up a small but very senior team to manage the crisis and to make quick decisions. So we already see our president leading by example there, where he has made himself the chairperson of the national task force, and I think that is a good example. Your senior leadership should be the people who are authorized to make very quick and sometimes very difficult decisions. When you go into this article, you will see that we have made certain recommendations on who should be on this team and what they should be authorized to do. Then third is, now we get to the actual planning. So as was mentioned earlier, ASATA has done a survey, and a lot of you have responded to that survey. And excuse me. And one of the questions that we asked, which I think is probably the most important question, is what is going to happen to your business if this carries on for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months? And it's a very, very scary question to ask because the options are looking quite bleak. One of the things that you absolutely have to do when it is a time like this in a crisis is you must make at least, I would say, 3 different plans, because there's a lot that we don't know. So this screenshot that you're seeing in front of you right now is from that McKinsey report that we referred to earlier. And they are essentially sticking to 3 scenarios. The one is obviously what we are hoping for, a quick recovery. The second one is where there's a global slowdown, and we see the kind of disruption that we're seeing right now, at least until the end of the second quarter. And then there is the worst case scenario, which is a global pandemic and a full-blown recession, and we only see recovery by sort of the third quarter. One of the very, very unpleasant things that we have to face up to is that we all belong to an industry that is probably the most exposed to this and will take the longest to recover, and particularly when we talk about leisure travel. And so it's really important that you face up to this situation and plan accordingly. One of the things that I would recommend that you focus on, for those of you who've already answered the survey, it gave us an indication of how long you think you will be able to operate under the current circumstances, and at what point you think you would have to retrench staff. Make double, if not triply sure that you have calculated your cash burn rate correctly. Because if your answer to that specific question, in other words, given the cash reserves that I have today, how long can I stay open? If that assessment is incorrect, you are going to find it very difficult to navigate the crisis as it carries on. So that is my first bit of very concrete advice, is just to make sure that you've calculated the cash burn rate of your business correctly. Then, number 4, once you've analyzed 3 scenarios, in other words, you've figured out what are the three scenarios that you want to plan around, the next step is to go and create plans. And that's, if you can move to the next slide, this is basically all of the areas in your business where you have to make plans. And if any of these are missing, you're going to find it quite difficult to navigate the crisis. Over the coming weeks, if not days, actually, we're working at a much faster pace, I would say, than any time certainly that I've been working. But in the next couple of days and weeks, we're going to be giving you some specific guidance on each of these layers. The first layer is finances. So if for those of us with smaller businesses in particular, and I myself am one of those people, the biggest risk to us at the moment is that we run out of cash. So please be on the lookout, and there are opportunities to secure short-term finance now. Please make sure that you understand what insurance policies you already have, and you have to read those policies on 2 fronts. Firstly, what insurance do you have against business interruptions? Some of you might already have cover, but would probably have not read the policy this carefully when you took it out. And then also to just make sure that your employees understand what kind of cover they have, if it's a group policy or an individual policy, if they are placed in quarantine and they can't work. So please, make sure that you understand what cover you already have in place. The second layer, also incredibly important, is looking after your employees. And there's the part where we proactively want to make sure that our employees are healthy and safe, and that we look after them so that they can continue to work. But there's also the slightly more unpleasant side to this equation, and that is, what are the things that you can do to reduce your payroll? And I'll talk about that next, once we've finished with this slide. Then you need to look at your infrastructure. Here we're talking about remote working strategies. Are you set up for remote working? Because that does seem to be the most efficient way to navigate these issues. And are you able to work remotely in a secure way? So whenever there's a crisis like this, we also see an uptick in fraud and cybersecurity incidents. So please make sure that your IT guys are in the room when you discuss remote working strategies, so you can make sure that you safeguard your data as well as the data of your customers. Suppliers, you need to be in touch with your supply chain. Our recovery is very much dependent on the recovery of the travel service providers as a group as well. So let's make sure that we understand the circumstances under which our suppliers are trading. There's also obviously a much greater chance of supplier failure in this time, as they face the same challenges as the travel agents at the moment. Then, on a little bit more of an optimistic note, we don't know how long this will take, but this will eventually pass. And at that point, we can expect some pent-up demand. So make sure that you're not only focusing on the risks, but also on the opportunities to serve your current clients, but also that you are ready to open your doors again in full when this passes. So you do need to also think about, how you can adjust your service delivery in this time, but also whether you are ready for when the crisis lifts. And then lastly, also, we have to look after our customers. As Natalia's study, the 21st century travel agent study, has showed us time and time again when people most appreciate travel agents is when they're in a crisis, and certainly this qualifies. So make sure that you look after your existing customers. They will thank you for it in business once the crisis passes. Right, so then what I want to focus on for a moment, and this is a new article that we have written that will go live in the next day or so, is let's focus on labor law. There's a lot of information out there on what is going on. And one of the things that we have to appreciate is the last time the planet was faced with a pandemic was in 1918, and most labor laws were written well after that. So we are truly in an unprecedented time. So I want to just quickly run you through the labor law realities that we face, then with the promise of more information in the next 24 hours or so. So firstly, your obligation as an employer is to make work as safe as possible for your employees, and you would have, many of you would have seen the guidances out there on how to discharge that duty in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We're now talking about focusing on remote working policies and rules so that people are isolating themselves, whether they are sick or not. We are talking about things like deep cleaning your office more than usual for those employees that can't work remotely and have to come to the office. We've seen very innovative strategies, and all of this will be in the article as well, of companies who have decided to extend working hours and then have employees work in shifts so everybody isn't at the office at the same time. And so there are a lot of plans to be made. One of the resources that we will make available to you is a study done by Gallup. They have analyzed the policies and strategies of 100 large organizations in the world on how they are making the workplace safe and how they are attacking the remote working challenges that we face. You also in this time need to be thinking about succession planning. Now that is a very unpopular topic. Obviously, I'm not necessarily talking about key or employees in critical functions dying, but I'm talking about employees in critical functions becoming unavailable for hopefully a short amount of time. And what you need to think about is, what are those critical functions? If a particular employee, let's say it's your CEO, gets ill, what is your short-term solution to plug that gap? And I just picked the CEO, but of course it could be your FD, it could be any number of senior people. Do you have someone who on short notice and for a short period of time can take over that function? A lot of employers are doing something that is called cross-functional training. In other words, making sure that there is another employee in the business that can fulfill that rare function. And the other place where I would encourage you to go look is for people who have retired. You have senior people who have retired but may be willing to come back to help out for a number of weeks or months. Then, where a lot of the misinformation is coming from is, what is the story with leave? Right, so let's talk first about sick leave. When does an employee qualify for sick leave? That hasn't changed. Employees will qualify for sick leave if they are too sick to work, or obviously if they contract the virus and they have to stay at home. And the same rules apply as would have always applied. If the employee still has sick leave available, that is paid leave, you are entitled to ask them to get tested, to get treatment, to provide you with the necessary medical information to prove that they are ill. When they have run out of paid sick leave, in other words, it's usually about 30 days in a 3-year cycle, and they are ill for longer than 7 days, they might be entitled to claim from the UIF. I would advise you to study up on those procedures and to help your employees to make that claim. That has changed from 14 days to 7 days December last year, and I'm seeing that a lot of the labor advice that is coming out still says it's if you're sick for longer than 14 days, it is if you're sick for longer than 7 days. And as we know, we're looking at quarantine periods for sick people that ranges from 14 to 21 days. Then the next question is, what if the person isn't sick, but they've had contact with a sick person, and now either because of a government policy that's not in place yet, but it might come, or in terms of your own policies, you want them to stay at home. What I'm going to say now is going to sound grossly unfair the first time I say it, but the law says that that employee must take paid leave. And if they do not have any more paid leave, that they must take unpaid leave. That is the law, right? If you are in the fortunate position where you can provide more assistance to your employees, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, But for many of us, the reality will be that we can't afford to have employees on extended paid leave. So when you speak to your employees, and we're going to get to that just shortly when I talk about alternatives to retrenchment, I think the important thing to emphasize when this feeling of unfairness will come to the fore, and it will, is that you are doing everything you can to protect the company so that they have jobs when the crisis passes. And so that is basically the position. If they're not sick yet, or if for whatever other reason they can't come to work, and that might be because they have to look after their children, your leave policies will apply, but in principle, they are not yet entitled to full paid leave unless they have actually contracted the virus and are actually too sick to work. This is one of the reasons why remote working policies and rules should be your focus, is of course, if the person has to be at home because they're under quarantine, but they can still work, then they're not entitled to any leaves. They must work. And I want to emphasize here that you just need to think about how you are going to communicate expectations and rules, and how you're going to enable your line managers to make sure that people continue to perform in the home environment. Then obviously we might get to the point, and given the survey results, certainly I think that this is probably a reality where you are going to feel like you need to start thinking about retrenchment. There is a section in the report that talks a lot about the alternatives to retrenchment. A lot of companies are offering their employees the opportunity to take reduced hours or reduced wages in order to protect everybody's jobs. And certainly from the sort of anecdotal evidence that we've gathered, employees largely are receptive to the fact that we can protect everybody's jobs by taking cuts in hours and pay. And you are actually obligated to investigate and try out these alternatives before you can go over into retrenchment. Now, retrenchment is an incredibly technical and highly policed area of law. You need to make sure that you discharge all of your legal obligations. Otherwise, you might find yourself in great legal and financial difficulties. So I would encourage everybody, when you think that retrenchment is on the cards, that you consult with a lawyer or with your labor consultants to make sure that you do it in the right way. There are quite a few procedural hoops to jump through, and if you skip them, you might find yourself in a situation where you are held liable by your employees. And then lastly, even in the employment sphere, we were talking about creating the small team to take critical decisions, and that is a very senior team, but you also need a team below them who will manage the crisis for you. We have included a section on who should be on that team. These are the people who are going to be doing the day-to-day work of making making environment safe, making sure that your employees' needs are looked after, and giving you information on what you still can do to make things easier. Right, so we will post that article as soon as it is ready. I think what I want to just end off with is what is most important, and this is the human condition and what psychologists refer to as the ostrich effect. This is such a big problem, and a problem without a solution, that we're all tempted to stick our heads in the sand. And this is exactly what we need to stop ourselves from doing. At the moment, what you need to do is take a long, realistic and hard look at what is going on in your business so that you can make plans that are realistic. And I would encourage everybody to continue to read up on what other organizations are doing. There's a lot of information out there, and we will sift through all of that for you and make sure that you know what the best sources are for inspiration from other organizations who are navigating this crisis. With that, I'm going to hand back to Otto.
Thank you, Elizabeth. But if I may, just pause at this point. We've had a number of questions, and guys, I remind you, please, in the interest of time, and just so that you know, there is 188 of you on this webinar. And so it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to complete this presentation and discussions with you and answer all the questions. So we please ask you to please use the questionnaire survey available to you, and we will post a link to that just now. But what I would like to do is there's just 3 or 4 questions that we can maybe quickly respond to before we carry on.
Sure.
So
I'd like to, sorry, Otto, if I can just jump in? Stefan van der Merwe asked a good question here about if a person's not sick but might be quarantined, it might lead to them not declaring the contact if they end up with unpaid leave. That is absolutely true, right? So there is, on the one hand, what the law says, right, which is sick leave if you're sick. If you've got paid annual leave for those cases where you have to stay at home, because of quarantine or whatever, you can access that. But if you run out of that, there's trouble. And if you're sick for longer than 7 days, there's UIF, right? So now the hope is, firstly, Stefan, that organizations will balance that with considerations like, let's rather get people to declare and make deals with them, that go beyond what the law forces us to do. And of course, that is a very valid strategy. There's also always the hope, and Otto is going to talk about lobbying government, but we've seen other governments making plans like giving more people access to the UIF than is the case right now, because we want people to declare, and we want people, even if, from a health perspective, but also from an economic perspective, to survive this crisis. So we are likely to see some form of assistance from the government, but also a lot of employers are saying, well, actually, I'd rather give everybody paid leave, even if they are not yet ill, so that they declare when they've had contact, and so we can curb the pandemic. So that's just, sorry, Otto, I interrupted you, but I thought
thank you.
A very important note to just emphasize.
Yeah. So then there was a question which well, there's a couple of ones, but ones that I wanted you to answer, please, Elizabeth. Can we charge a professional service fee to process cancellations, as there has been a service rendered to clients?
Right. So one of the notes that we definitely want to produce is on this question, because this is, I think, the third or fourth time that we've gotten it. So the principle is that you can charge things that you agreed to, right? So you have an agreement with your customer, and so the answer to that question will be, what did you agree before they took up the service? Unfortunately, this is not something that you can unilaterally change midstream. This is something that you had to have had as part of your contract to start off with. But you can't just unilaterally add fees that weren't previously disclosed. That's the short answer. Obviously, there might be exceptions to that answer. But always go back to, okay, what was agreed when the client started making use of my service? And I certainly think that after this crisis has passed, a lot of us will be amending our service agreements with our clients to include provisions for this. Don't know if that answers the question. It's not good news, I'm afraid.
Thanks for that. Then, do you perhaps know the legalities around paying less salary if the company cannot afford full salaries because of no bookings coming in?
Yes, so what you're talking about there is usually the first step would be to try and lobby your employees to all agree to a reduced salary in the interest of keeping everybody's jobs. Otto will be able to confirm this, but it was in discussions that we were involved in this week. Some business leaders have indicated that employees are coming together in this way and saying, look, let's all take a 20% pay cut so that everybody's jobs can be protected. So that's obviously if everybody agrees to it. If you don't have that agreement and you are looking to reduce salaries or looking to reduce jobs, then you are actually retrenching people or partially retrenching them, and you have to comply with Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. I would certainly advise you at that point to get some labour advice, just to make sure that you are on the safe side of that procedure, because it is very strictly followed. And there are all kinds of steps that you have to take before you can actually do it. But it is possible to do it. Of course, if the operational requirements require it, I think that we're going to see quite a bit of that. But I would try and go the voluntary route first, and you might be surprised.
All right, thanks. So Elizabeth, when will we have this document available for our members? And obviously we will put it onto this resources page, right?
I have held off just to see if there are questions that come up today that I haven't answered yet, but it is ready to be sent to Natalia, and then we will load it as soon as we can. Certainly, I would think within the next day or so.
All right, fantastic. So again, we will provide you with that link shortly where you'll be able to post your questions. So if over the next hour or two you have any other thoughts specifically around your labor challenges and your workforce challenges that you'd like answered, please put those questions to us so that we can incorporate that into the document that Elizabeth is finalizing. Folks, just moving on, I wanted to chat to you a little bit about the role that ASATA is playing in terms of lobbying government. Most of you will know that as one of my roles is also to represent the industry on the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, of which ASATA is a member. The Tourism Business Council of South Africa is our primary channel to government when it comes to lobbying and engaging on issues that affect us. So there have been obviously engagements with the Minister of Tourism, and we have certainly used the platforms made available to us to engage her directly and indirectly on some of the issues that is affecting us. And we have been providing them with quite a lot of input, especially feedback as it relates to some of the challenges that we've certainly seen pop up since the President announced the sweeping changes and the travel bans that they were going to put in. But I think most importantly to all of you is that those who listened to the President's speech on Sunday would have picked up that he was talking about the development of a stimulus package of sorts, and those that have read the news will have noted that a number of first world countries across the globe have been making available to various values related to the GDP different types of stimulus to ensure that businesses are able to sustain and maintain some level of operation as they go through this very unprecedented phase. And ostensibly what we're talking about here is your business is drying up, and with no new business coming in, how is that affecting your cash flow and your ability to continue operating? So we are, and this was one of the key drivers for us when we asked you to complete the survey last week, was that we needed to have a very clear sense of exactly how bad the situation is on the ground. And I want to thank all of you who took the time to respond to that survey. I'm very grateful for probably one of the biggest responses we've ever had, and it has certainly helped to validate and qualify the results that have come out of that survey. And that is part of the document that we will be utilizing when we are working with government to lobby them, specifically in terms of understanding the impact on the travel industry. Now, whilst we are not going to be talking about a specific support or stimulus package for our sector, it'll be across the board for businesses. What we need to be sure of, and what my role is to make sure that the travel industry is considered one of those industries that qualifies for support as part of the stimulus package. And what it is that we feel might be most beneficial, or where we believe the government might be able to support. I think we all understand the economic situation we found ourselves in prior to this crisis. And we also know that effectively there isn't a lot of money in the coffers either. So what I am not anticipating is that there's going to be cash readily available to support businesses. But what I am hoping for is that there will be some broad consensus around how there could be opportunities to better leverage the UIF. It was already indicated by Elizabeth that that is one area that would be utilized when it comes to managing your workforce. But we also know that the UIF is extremely well funded. And so there may be an opportunity to extend how that UIF might work to support some of your business costs with regards to your staffing. The other areas where we believe stimulus could support is in tax breaks. And what we are also looking at is directly trying to find ways that you as a business might be able to better have access to cash flow. And when we had an extraordinary board meeting on Monday, it was very interesting to get some of the insights that some of the businesses were applying with regards to how they were addressing it. So one of the thoughts that came up, for example, was if you're providing a Provident Fund, have you contacted your Provident Fund and spoken to them about having some sort of a deferment for the next 2 to 3 months in making contributions towards that? You could also possibly be taking those discussions up with your medical aid. And there are probably a number of other areas where we could look at trying to find out how your business can minimize the impact on the current cash flow pains that you are going to feel. So that is one of the key focus areas for us at the moment, is to ensure that consideration is given to a meaningful stimulus package, and that the travel industry will be one of the industries that will have access to that stimulus package. The President did reaffirm that they are working on a package at the moment when they met with the Tourism Business Council CEO yesterday. And so we are working very closely with them to drive that agenda, and just watch this space as we continue to work for you in trying to get some support. So other than that, obviously the other areas that we'd be working with government is specifically around travel bans, visa requirements. How long do they believe that this ban will be in place? What measures are they considering in terms of when will they review it? So we certainly placed that question and said, well, look, that's fine. You've put in a travel ban, but when are you going to review it? Because most other countries have at least said we'll check it every 14 days or every 30 days. What we've gotten from the government is a promise that they will continue, without giving a specific timeline, they will continue to review the current travel ban and make decisions based on information that is available to them, whether that is in terms of either tightening it up further or loosening it up at the point where we've obviously started to turn around and win the battle against this virus. So that is the work that we're doing with government at this stage, and we will continue to endeavor to represent you as we go through that. And then if we could just get the next slide up, thank you so much. So supplier lobbying. This is a challenging one for us, as you can well imagine, and not least of which, at the end of the day, you have commercial agreements that are in place between yourselves as travel agents and the suppliers. We are not involved in your commercial agreements. We cannot get involved in your commercial agreements because ultimately the association cannot be seen to in any way, shape or form be attempting to influence specific policies, commercial policies that looks as if we are colluding or working collectively on one particular outcome. Having said that, though, we have recognized that there have been tremendous challenges with the airlines in particular. And whilst many of them have been incredibly proactive, some of them better than others, not only in being flexible around change and cancellation policies, but also with any fees. And they've also been very good at communicating the processes that you need to follow. But we are becoming increasingly aware that the airlines are quite erratic at the moment in terms of the decisions that they're making, that policies are being changed on a daily basis. This is exhaustive and incredibly difficult for you guys to manage on behalf of your customers, and we appreciate that, and we understand how difficult this is. But for them too, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, they need to reassess their business position and understand what steps they need to take to safeguard their airline businesses and hopefully ensure that they too survive this and come out on the other end. Now, when it comes to the airline space, our primary point of contact is obviously IATA, and we have been working very closely with them and interrogating them. In fact, I can tell you that we held an extraordinary PAPGJC meeting this morning at 10 o'clock, where the global agent community engaged with IATA and the airline representatives on a number of issues that you have raised with me and have been raised by other travel agents across the globe. Not least of which has been inconsistencies and lack of access to airlines when it comes to their policies and the changes of that. But I think one of the big ones that is looming over us is your BSP settlements. In our survey, we asked you whether you believe that your BSP refunds were going to be exceeding forward sales. It is very evident that that has already happened, and that is going to have a severe impact on your cash flows, not least which because you are on a monthly remittance, admittedly only until the end of April, but you are on a monthly remittance. That means that you are remitting money today, or should I say this month, that is for sales that took place prior to the travel ban and prior to this crisis. So that places immense pressure on you in the immediate short term as it comes to your BSP settlement. But for most countries that have already switched to fortnightly or weekly remittances, they have been asking questions about the opportunity of possibly extending the remittance cycles and to see whether or not IATA would consider that. Now, that was discussed at length in the meeting this morning, at length. And I can tell you that IATA are not interested in any way, shape, or form in reviewing your remittance cycles at this stage. I think in some ways, whilst this current remittance is going to be difficult, over the next month, at least you will have some time to recover and restore some of your cash flows, hopefully, whereas those that are remitting weekly and fortnightly are going to find themselves in a slightly different position. But the motivation and the reason that IATA said they did not want to mess with the remittance periods is because they're of the opinion that you will be switching from a paying phase, i.e. you are remitting cash over for sales to the BSP, to a receiving phase. In other words, you will be getting more money through refunds than you are currently paying out on your remittances. And as a result, they don't believe that this is beneficial to the airlines or yourselves. To those that have posed the question about a review on the remittance, at this stage, IATA have indicated to us that they are not prepared to change that. However, those of you that are involved in the BSP processes and have access to the information that are sent out, I encourage you please to check, and we will, by the way, include this notice as part of the newsletter, which normally goes out today, but in light of this webinar, we've delayed it until tomorrow. We will see that there is a notice from IATA responding to this very particular issue, not just with regards to BSP remittance, but also with regards to the timelines, giving you extra leeway with regards to the number of days extra that you may have, but obviously you need to communicate that you are having challenges with your remittances. They are also talking about renewals and guarantees, and so I will encourage you all to please, if you haven't already seen the document, check your IATA correspondence that would most likely have come through to you via BSP link. It came to you guys last night or late yesterday afternoon. It is a very critical document that confirms where IATA stands with regards to BSP and BSP cycles at this stage. So as I said, we will include that in the newsletter tomorrow. We will continue to lobby IATA. There was a question that was raised with regards to how we obviously have guarantees in place with IATA to protect the airlines' money, but how are we protected if the airlines go bust? And whilst we were advised, as they did with SAA, that when they found that airlines may be in financial difficulty, they would request for them to put up additional guarantees to protect the money within the BSP. So yes, airlines also have to put up guarantees. Ultimately, I suggested that by the time IATA had figured out that there was a problem with an airline, you could ask them for guarantees, but there was every likelihood that it would be too late already. And I suggested that they needed to take a long, hard look at this policy around business as usual when we're not operating in business as usual times. So I suggested to IATA this morning that surely what they should be doing as IATA and the BSP is to protect the money of the customers through the agents, and not just protect the money of the airlines. Because ultimately, if we are settling on the BSP and that BSP money is settled to the airlines and those airlines find themselves into financial difficulty, that money is gone. So they have to work harder at protecting us as the agents and our customers. Whilst they noted my point, and whilst they acknowledged that in fact they had been looking at this, it's almost a concept of no pay, no fly, or only pay when you fly. They said that it is something they are considering, but in terms of the way the systems runs and the need for this to be developed urgently, they would not be able to implement this as quickly as the next couple of days or even the next couple of weeks. But that is the kind of strategic and forward thinking that I think we need to continue to put to IATA and the airlines, and ensure that they are taking every step possible to also protect the customers' money, because the airlines are at the front line of this and are the first to obviously feel the pinch together with us. So that's where we find ourselves currently with regards to IATA. Generally speaking, in terms of suppliers, we are currently attempting to develop and then put out to you a table of contents where you'll have one point of resource where all of the policies regarding change policy, cancellation policies, communication strategies are all in one place from the suppliers, and you will find that on our website. So bear with us as we try to collate that. And again, keep in mind this situation is incredibly fluid, and we're seeing changes happening, not even on a daily basis, but sometimes multiple times a day. So we will endeavor to do our very best to be a point of contact and a point of resource for you as we go through this. So that's where we are with regards to suppliers. Folks, here we are. This is your link for you to post your questions. And I know, and Nats, forgive me if you've done it already, but you will see that there's a chat section as part of this Zoom presentation. And we will post that onto the chat section. You can then click that, and obviously you'll be able to go straight through to the survey. Thank you, Doreen. There it is now, folks. So if you open the chat box, bottom right-hand corner, you will see Doreen has just posted the link for the Survey Monkey. And we would ask you to please post your questions. We have noted a number of questions have come through on the Q&A. I'm sorry, has anyone had a chance to look at those while I was talking, Nats or Elizabeth?
I'm sharing my screen, so I actually, unfortunately, can't check this, but I'm happy to stop sharing.
No, that's fine. Let me quickly have a look and see what we've got here. Please, can you find it? Okay, so Michael, I think you would have picked up from my answer, Michael De Silva, with regards to considering the reduction of BSP payments. Whilst that is not an immediate option, what they are prepared to do is to look at giving you guys some leeway in terms of up to 3 days outside of your normal remittance cycle to make the payments across. And obviously, if you are planning to use that service, and that will be all in that notice that I just mentioned, and you should already have as part of your BSP link, the notice that went out by ASATA yesterday, that you should have an extra 3 days, but you will actually need to request for that to be applied. Don't just blankly wait for 3 days. You will need to ask them, please. And then let me just see what else we've got there.
We have Alan asking.
Yeah, I've spoken. So Alan, I think we've covered it. Oh, hang on. Sorry, there's another one. When airlines refuse a refund, would the Consumer Protection Act not force the airline to refund? So I'll reach to our legal eagle on that one, because there are some challenges with regards to how the Consumer Protection Act works. And one of the challenges that we've had is an ongoing delay in terms of the airlines providing specific codes of behavior and conduct in terms of airlines and consumer protection. And so the Consumer Protection Act was always designed for consumer items, especially consumer items where people where they are disposable and easy to replace, whereas these are services and they are slightly different. But Elizabeth, where airlines refuse a refund for a paid reservation, the Consumer Protection Act, I know we covered this in our Q&A as well.
No, that's fine. So let me just jump in there. The situation will be different depending on whether it's domestic or international. So the international guys try very hard to argue that the CPA doesn't apply to them. If it is quite clear that the contract is concluded locally in South Africa, so if it's, well, I don't want to even say SAA or whoever, right, then hypothetically, the CPA should apply, because in terms of the CPA, when it comes to advanced bookings and orders, you have a right to cancel against a reasonable cancellation penalty for any advanced booking. So, for the domestic, that is the answer. Whether the airlines, whether they act in accordance with the CPA, of course, is a completely different question, and we know that they often try and get out of it. But those clients, we would certainly refer to the Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman, for an adjudication. The airlines have been trying to do a CPA code of conduct for as long as I can remember, but haven't quite done that yet. So that section still applies to them. And as I said, with international travel, it gets a little bit murky because of the fact that the airlines argue that the law of the country where they are domiciled will apply. Okay.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yes.
So I've noted that there's been a number of questions that have popped up both on the chat side and the question side. I will try and see if we can place one or two more questions before the time is up. Let me just see here. What do we have in place with forward bookings with money that has already been paid over to tour operators? So there is nothing in place. And I know that sounds very blunt, but I just want to remind everybody that the travel industry in South Africa is not regulated. Ultimately, you are selecting your suppliers based on confidence, trust, and that they are delivering the products and services for which you have been requested to deliver to your customers. There is no mechanisms, there are no requirements to put money in trust funds, etc., etc. So I think it's very important as part of your supplier screening, and if indeed you have made payments on forward bookings to tour operators, please engage them and speak to them directly, share with them your concerns, and try to understand and alleviate exactly what it is that is. Because again, there are terms and conditions related to forward bookings and cancellation fees that may apply. That's going to have to be a one-on-one between you and the supplier, but principally there is no particular, as I said, sort of trust fund or trust account in which those payments have to be done. There's no law that is governing or overseeing that at all. So there was also a question about whether IATA would consider a reduction in BSP payments at the end of March and in the future. Yeah, look, as I said to you, I don't think that that's going to be possible, but I know, and I'm very grateful that IATA are actually on this webinar, and we will take those questions back. Are we able to request IATA to release travel agent guarantees for now, as long as they pay for the insurance? So I'm assuming what you're asking here relates specifically to those that have switched from a bank guarantee to a DIP, and you are still in a phase where you are running both of those. I would suggest that you pop that on to a question to IATA. They have a platform where you can put in all your requests. I will certainly take that up with IATA's local office. Alex is on this webinar, and if Alex can give us a response, maybe he's feverishly typing right now. If not, I will take it up with them, and I'll see whether there's anything we can do there for you guys. What else have we got? What is our legal recourse when airlines change their waiver and refund policies on a daily basis? Yeah, again, a moving target, guys. You know, they're also finding it incredibly difficult to manage this. I don't think that there is legal recourse, but at the same, you know, the airline terms and conditions are very different to any other contract, and we find it quite unusual sometimes in that, you know, you have a clear agreement that is signed between your supplier and yourself, and yet with airlines and airline tickets, it's a very, very different situation, and they all depend on the particular airfare. You all know that depending on the airfare, you have different terms and conditions, and some of them are stricter the cheaper they are. But we will take that one away, and we'll see if we can give you any further answers. I suspect, however, that there is going to be very difficult to find legal recourse in that regard. IATA have replied to say they will take it up as soon as the case is received, need a bit more info on the case. So the person asking about whether or not they could get their IATA guarantees returned if they switched onto the DIP, I would ask you please to log a case with IATA, let them have a look at it and see if they can support you on that. That, I think, let's just have a look here. I see there is a bit of a chat going on the side here. I don't know if at any point you want to jump. I see, Elizabeth, you have replied to Alan.
It's just me answering some of the questions that I can, but I just want to tell everybody that the issue of cancellations and refunds we will address in the next couple of days in a note as well, because this is a question that we're getting quite a lot of at the moment.
No, for sure. So guys, the last question that we're going to deal with today, because we are out of time, and thank you so much, everybody. Do you think government has acknowledged the pace at which they've needed to intervene and respond? I think partly they do, But at the same time, I know that it is imperative and that the onus is on us to place that pressure on government to understand exactly how serious the situation is in terms of the business being affected by what has happened. So we will continue to push as hard as we can to ensure that the stimulus package comes to life, and that it comes to life sooner rather than later. This webinar has been recorded and we will make it available to all of you to review and see it again, or to pass it on to anybody who may have missed it. Folks, we again implore that you please use the SurveyMonkey link. If someone could just post it again, please, on the chat. And we will also put it on the newsletter tomorrow morning. Would please place those questions to us. We will endeavor to incorporate all of those questions in an ongoing updated FAQ that we will constantly share. And we encourage you, please, on at least once or twice a daily basis, to review the coronavirus website. And if there are any areas in your business that you feel ASATA has missed or overlooked and is a blind spot for us at the moment that you need our help on, and keep in mind, this is about broad industry issues, not specific one-on-one issues that you may have with a particular supplier. I will obviously look at it, because that way we can also see if we're picking up that problem from multiple suppliers. So do send it through, and we will endeavor to do our very, very best to continue to support you. So my thanks for your time this afternoon. Our thoughts are with you. We are thinking of you constantly. We are doing our absolute level best to support you. We wish you well. And we will continue to do our very, very best. Good luck out there, everybody, and Godspeed. Good luck. Thank you.
Otto and Elizabeth, so again, please, we really do want to support you as much as possible. Please, if you have any questions whatsoever, if you are needing responses or guidance, go onto that SurveyMonkey link. It will be on the coronavirus.asata.co.za website as well. You can click on the SurveyMonkey link, add in the questions that you have whenever you have them, and also tell us how we can be supporting you better. The entire team is behind you, and we want to make sure that you have as much information at your fingertips timelessly so that you can make informed decisions. Thank you again, Otto and Elizabeth. I suspect this will not be our last webinar. We will probably be having many, but yeah, good luck, everyone. We're thinking of you.
Good luck.